Welcome. This is a panel on best practices for contributing to Node core. I want to keep this rather informal. I kept telling everyone that I was going to put together some questions and send them to them so they can kind of think about it. Yeah, I never did that. So I want to keep it, fairly light. Just want to do some round of introductions first. And as we go through the introductions, let's start with Anna. As we go through the introductions, if you can, briefly talk about, I had to how and why you first got started with contributing to Node, right? So just, how long is the answer, keep it relatively short. You've been around for a while, so. So, Anna.
Okay, so, it's not even been a year, and since I first contributed to Node core, that was in December. I was working on a project, and I accidentally passed 0 instead of a function to set timeout, and that kind of worked. It just threw an error when the timeout was timed out, and that was pretty hard to find in our code base. So I patched Node core, made it throw an error immediately when it got to 0 or anything in that place. And that helped me find the error. I decided, I can submit that patch to Node core, and I did, and that's how I got started.
So I've been using Node since about 2012. I found out when I was doing an installation, I wanted to have my phone control a computer, and it turned out that was hard. About a year ago, I was looking for a new job, and I tweeted and said, hey, I'm looking for work. And this amazing individual, Andy B. Smith, who I had collaborated with before, was like, hey, do you want to work on Node for IBM? And that was an obvious answer. And then I was hired and given space and time to learn and start contributing, which is incredibly lucky for that kind of opportunity. And the amazing Rich Trott in San Francisco actually took me down and spent time and helped me find my first couple contributions. And I'm just going to plug Code and Learn on Saturday morning, which is a very similar kind of thing. If any of you are interested in learning and getting started, you should come and we'll help you find some commits.
Test. Okay, it works. For me, it's a really long time ago that I started working on Node, but it worked like this. This was 2010, and I had just seen sort of the initial JSConf video where Node was announced. And I was like, this is amazing, we need this. And I was working at a very small Dutch startup at the time. And what we did is we ran headless Firefox to do some JavaScript on the back end. It was super unstable. I'll say used a ton of memory, so it didn't really, the performance was quite bad. And there were other practical things. So I was like, we need this, but then very practically speaking, it at the time only worked on OS X and Linux. That was fine for us, except that our devs were using Windows. We were a PHP shop. And so I was like, well, let me just fix that. And that was a kind of hubris is what they call. It really was much more work than I thought it would be. But once I started doing that, I just loved it. It was really fun. And it turned out that some people had tried, and I started reading MSDN, which is the Windows documentation, and I found amazing secret things that I never knew existed in there, and I was like, we need this to make Node work on Windows. Anyway, kind of figured it out, then had to more or less wait for half a year until someone, or the someone would be Ryan Dahl at the time, actually was open to landing my patches. But when that happened, it turned out there were a lot more people and companies actually interested in porting Node.js to Windows, and one of them was Rackspace. So they offered me a job, and I was like, well, that sounds fun. Let me just do that. That's it.
So I started contributing. I started working with Node very early on. I never contributed to Node till after the fork and the merge back. Basically, there was, when I tried before that, was not really accessible. So there was no way of getting in, basically. The door was shut. So I became a contributor at the end of last year. And I've been landing a couple of very nice patches to this streams implementation, which is something that is a little bit critical. So, and yeah, that's me.
Okay, go ahead and hold on to the mic, 'cause I'm going to ask another question and we'll pass it back around this way.
Great.
So, outside of Bert, the three of you are relatively new contributors to Node. When you first started, what are some things that you know now that you wished you knew before you got started that would really help someone who is just coming to the project and trying to get started with contributions?
So for me, it's a little bit different on this regard because I already knew all the source code in and out, and I just couldn't get a way to start helping. I didn't see a way of, from a community perspective, to starting helping out the projects. So for me, it was more that. What helped in general was getting there, opening the files, trying to understand what's going on. That was really, really important. Most of the stuff was, in fact, the C++ bits and libuv, not the Windows part. Never read. I've never read that. But like literally sitting there, trying to understand what the code was doing and how things were playing out. And I recommend everybody to do this. Like if you want to contribute to core in whatever specific area you want to help and contribute, open the source file, read what's in there. It's usually decently documented this day. It wasn't so much in the past, but right now it's fairly good documented, all the art pieces, probably. And I think you can like start understanding what's going on and propose fixes. Because a lot of stuff like are literally minor, but they will actually improve the user experience of people using Node. So that's what it is for me.
Do either of you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so two things. The first is like provisioning your system. Like before you even start trying to contribute, like make sure your system's provisioned correctly. And one thing I can really suggest is a little application called Ccache. You install Ccache and then you add it to your path, and Ccache wraps all of the compilers and caches while compiling, and it will bring your compile time down quite a significant amount. And be prepared for compiling. But the other thing that I think is worth putting out there is you can contribute to Node, and it doesn't necessarily mean contributing to Node core. There are so many different places that we could use support and help and projects that have various levels of accessibility to them. The GitHub bot is an example of one. It's a Node application that people are working on and adding features to that's really helping with the performance of the entire organization. The website is an application that, again, is a Node application that people can contribute to. The documentation. This is a really great place to get started. Anna will know if we've finished having the notes of when all the docs were added, because that was an effort that was going, and those were good first contributions. And I'll actually use that as a means to hand the mic over so she can correct me or agree.
We actually do now have almost all of our documentation markers that indicate when a feature was added. So yeah, that were some pretty nice first contributions by people. And yeah, generally docs things are a really easy way to get familiar with the process of contributing to Node core. I maybe should have done that before I did my first contribution, because like that would have helped just knowing what to do. What people were expecting me to do when they said I should document my change. I really asked if that meant like, should I go to the changelog and add it there? Didn't know that was automatically generated. And just.
Okay. So, yeah, as Miles mentioned, that there are lots of different ways to contribute, right? You know, it's not just contributing core or code to core. What are the you mentioned website and those kinds of things. What are the other ways besides code, right? I mean, there's the documentation, there's translations, right? Tests, those kinds of things. Is there anything else that you can think of there along those lines?
You're putting me on the spot.
Of course.
So right now I'm stalling. Well, I mean, so if you are in my position right now and you're sitting here and trying to think, how can I contribute, and you can't come up with an idea, one thing you could do is on IRC to come into hashtag NodeDev. It's the IRC channel that the collaborators are in. It is a very friendly environment in that channel in particular. Very much about collaboration, very much about getting things done. If you were to come in and say, hey, I want to help, I would be extremely surprised if someone didn't say, okay, let's talk about this and figure it out. If you're in the audience and you're not sure where or how you could contribute, but you have the energy and drive to, come find me, message me on Twitter, find other people who are on stage or who have the energy and want to. But people will work with you to help you figure out how you can get involved.
Okay, so also Rich Trott, who has been mentioned here before, but yeah, he's just great at getting new people into the project, and he's actually put up a little project of his own. It's called Node.to-do, and it's like setting you up with first good contributions that you can make to Node Core. So if you have no idea what you could do, and you just like somebody who tells you, oh yeah, you could do that, and that would be a perfect place to go.
Either of you?
Yeah, so let me be a little annoying here. I think it's kind of the wrong question to ask. I think you'd be better off, you'd be better off having a mission, something that you want to accomplish, something you think is not possible right now and really should be possible. And then you ask yourself, okay, where should I make changes? What should I add to what? And it could be, maybe it might be something you want to change about core, but I think in very many cases it might be you write a module, you find a module that exists, make it better. I would say in general, if you want to contribute to any open source project, well, unless it's your job, then you ask your boss what to do. But if it's not, then you should not expect anyone to tell you what to do. It's really not how open source works in general, but particular Node.js, there's not a global general sense of direction, this is where we should go. There's a lot of individuals that contribute, and they have their own kind of maybe call it private pet peeves or things that they find important. So for me, this was indeed that Windows thing I did, but you'll find Fedor, who's sitting there in the audience, who cared very much about TLS at some point, and then he made it much better. And and so there's just people around that care about something in very particular, and they will fix that. And the other advice that I would give is you need probably much more patience than you think you do. What happens a lot is people drive by, they make in itself fairly good and very useful contribution, but they're not really around to actually see it through and get it landed, and that's really what you need. If you think about certain contributors like Trevor Norris, for example, he's been working on building a tracing framework for, the last 2 years, and I think now more or less it's getting into the core framework. Other examples might be, we've had a patch that added multi-isolate support to Node, more or less. It was, I think, 80% done or something. It was actually phenomenal work, but then the author decided to do something else, and that means it never gets landed because it is your pet peeve and not someone else's, so it's very unlikely that someone else will actually pick up your work and finish it. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
You.
Address that.
So, it's a tough question in the sense. So first thing, there are probably areas in Node that you think you could be done better or different or that have bugs. I found something. I found one some days ago. Still haven't even submitted an issue, okay? I will just send up the app probably, but it's, first of all, I will tell you, scratch your own itch if possible. If you eat something that can be, that you think should be changed and you're passionate about, do that. This is the most, because that's the only way you will be to the you will follow up enough to get your change land.
Right.
That's a key part. So one of the most problematic piece in open source software in general is a person that, oh, well, I want this changed, sends a pull request. Then some people say, well, look, you should change this and that, and there's a review of that pull request. And that, some people just bail out. They just disappear. Or they don't follow up. Like I had to, basically, I work around the clock to land the thing right before V7 was cut, because the guy was like, oh, well, disappeared. And they didn't make a little change that was required, like a comment or something. Like, just like that. So just to be on point, it's this is the first thing. The second thing, there are I think there is also a new installer coming or something. Just to mention new areas where also all the onboarding in general, user experience, can be probably done much better. Also all that stuff, it's really important because it's something that all of us that have been around for a long while, we don't remember how it is learning the stuff. So if you are new to Node and joined the bandwagon recently, you probably have a much closer experience on what it is learning Node now. So all of this can be probably done.
And I definitely, I want to continue on that point, because it is a very important point that those of us, I haven't been around for a long time, but I've still been around and involved enough that even I start to forget how it is for a new person coming to the project to actually, to learn it. So, the two of you have probably been, out of everyone here, been around the longest, and you've seen the process for contributions change, gone through the different, the change in governance, right? And we've made steps to make the process easier, more inclusive, more friendly to new people, but we're nowhere near there, right? We're nowhere near to the point where we need to be. So I want to kind of get some thoughts. I mean, how has the evolution been? Have we been heading the right direction, and how much more do we have left to do? And I want to ask both of you this question as well. So it's
okay. Whenever I started to look into contributing to core, I mean something, I now know enough of this to I pass through my imposter syndrome to some extent, and I can contribute to Node. I can do something here. I can help the project grows. As I said, the door was shut. Like, there was no way. Like, I even tried, can I send a PR to send a couple of things? And I was told very bluntly, no, we don't want your fixes. And that is definitely not. And for no real reason, giving me very bad reasons why that was not possible. So all of this is the exact opposite of being inclusive and saying some fakes might not be good. It's true, but giving very bad motivation that are absolutely not technical and no nothing, it was very bad. At that point in time, it was before the whole thing was very bad. So I think we are definitely going in the right direction. I think what we should do better is having people stay around, keep them active in the PRs. One of the things that we are not great at is we provide feedbacks and reviews. I say mostly between ourselves rather than other people. I try to reply to all the pull requests that I see and that I watch very smoothly and quickly, but we are still not fast enough in providing feedbacks to wannabe contributors and new people that are joining the project. And
the feedback that I've seen, and I'm guilty of this too, because just as a matter of time, it tends to be a bit too blunt, right? Okay, this is wrong, this has got to be fixed, and then not really mentoring somebody through the process of what needs to be changed and why, and that kind of thing. So
the problem is because, unfortunately, there's a lot of traffic. It's a very high traffic project, so it's really hard. At least it's really hard to keep up. Just to clarify, I've disabled all the notification. I got notification only if it's at Node.js collaborators, because it's not feasible, right. Or Node.js streams or whatever. Now we have a nice bot that tags the working group automatically. Right. That was a good move to improve all of that.
Right. Just to add more automation. Bert, do you have any .NET, just in terms of how things have evolved?
How things have evolved?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the question. Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, obviously the project got much bigger. So initially it was very easy to coordinate things because, you know, we would just go on IRC, have our own like little private channel and like, you know, figure out what the next steps would be. All kind of obvious. But then as a project grows that, you know, longer scales, it becomes too noisy, too many people, you know, are around in the first place to, you know, and have opinions about things, so it's not so easy to agree on things. I think another issue is like, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that it's generally better not to have like a dictator or like benevolent or not. But I think in the early stages of the project, it was really beneficial because it, you know, it made it very easy to, like, there was someone who had a vision and could make decisions. They could be like promises, no, you know, like child processes, yes. I mean, that at some point they were not there and then it was decided they should be there. It was easy enough. I think nowadays, this is a bit of an issue with Node.js. It's very hard to, as a group, have, you know, any opinion at all or like make decisions. There's always a couple people that, you know, think the opposite. You know, there's no necessarily natural leadership. I'm not saying there should be, but and maybe this is the biggest problem currently. There's also not necessarily a lot of structure around it. So it's not like, okay, I would like to add this feature to core. Can I ask someone whether it would be accepted? Like, there's not really anyone you can ask. Like at best, you could ask the, you know, the core technical committee whether it could be done, and the core technical committee will usually say, we don't know, and by the way, there's no patch, so like you just go figure it out on GitHub. And so I think if as a, you know, if you were a pure outsider, it would be very hard to figure out whether it's worthwhile, you know, trying to get something into Node or not. And it takes a little bit of like, yeah, I would say, you know, you need to know the community a little bit, you know, understand what, you know, sometimes people have mentioned certain directions the project is going in. That would be good indications right now. And yeah, just, you know, sort of understanding the philosophy of the project, and that's something you can't really. It's very hard to write down and get, you know, get people to understand if they're new. But it's definitely something we could be better at, right?
Right. I'm gonna first Anna and then Miles. Just as far as your experience has been so far, is the project as inclusive as it needs to be? And what can we be doing better? Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's definitely quite a few things we can be doing better, and the question is how. Like, I think I want to say a few things to what Bert said. So, like, one thing you can do, if you're not sure whether something is worthwhile or not, is just post an issue. That's what I do. Like, when I'm not sure whether people would accept the change I'd like to propose. And, like, it got shut down often enough. But, like, I just asked, and I didn't want to go to all the trouble of making the code and opening a pull request. So, yeah, I just asked. That's one thing you can do. You can take a look at, like, we're not super good at documenting the values we try to represent. A lot of people think that the core project should be rather small, like anything that can be done with outside of it should be done with outside of it. So that's one thing you can look at. We're trying to document that kind of thing. We're not very good at having that in a central place or anything. Yeah, but those are the things we can do better. Yeah, it's not just, there's not really that thing where you can't just ask anyone. You can go to IRC, like what the other said, that's a good place. But otherwise, yeah, opening an issue and just asking is the way to go.
So I'm not sure that we will ever be able to just call it an inclusive place, but what we can do is set up processes and environments that make it easier to get towards that. I don't think that we can make any claims about where we're at right now, but what we can talk about are things that we've done to improve it. So one thing I can think about is the documentation working group, where we collectively agreed that we wanted to make the process of landing documentation fixes lower. And so prior, like, you need to, like, to land a commit onto core, generally you need to have a particular length of your title, the comments need to be formatted a certain way, you need to, like, there's just a whole bunch of ritual involved just in labeling your commit. And if you're committing code to Node constantly, that's not really something you think about. But if you're someone who is newer to programming or is not as experienced in contributing over GitHub, simply rebasing or squashing a commit isn't, like, that will be a whole day just to do that. Right. And that can really block people and stop them from contributing. So I think figuring out more processes that we can do to help enable and empower individuals will be a way in which we can do this.
Right. And I think I'll just go ahead and answer part of the question as well. I mean, part of this, it goes back to mentoring people through the process, right? I remember, some of my early commits, they didn't follow the commit guidelines, and I was told that, well, you have to go fix that before we'll even look at this. And it was like, well, that process kind of sucks, right? For somebody who's brand new to the project and they don't understand what those guidelines are, right? To be told that, we're not even going to look at it until you conform to that. And I think we're doing a lot better with having the people who are actually landing the commits making those changes. Or walking people through more incrementally what those changes need to be and how to do them, right? So hopefully we've gotten better. If we haven't, let us know. So. Good.
You talk first, that's right.
Okay. We have linting now as part of our CI, and it's really extensive, and that's actually helped address a lot of these concerns, because a lot of the pull requests that would come in, a lot of the nits that, all the comments end up being are, this doesn't match the style we have, and there ended up being a ton of those, right? And it's very demotivating for a new contributor to have to deal with all those. So now that we have the linting, that's actually helped quite a bit, but we haven't gone as far as having a standard Git hook yet, so.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to question you on the question. Sorry, James.
That's fine.
So I think whether it's easy to contribute and whether we are inclusive doesn't really relate very much to one another. Let me give a slightly different example. Let's say let's talk about skiing. Like, learning to ski sucks. I don't know if you ever tried. If you're not, like, if you're kind of like made from wood like myself, like I would just fall all the time, and like you'll bruise yourself. It's, the fact that learning to ski sucks, you can't really say skiing is not very inclusive. That's nothing to do with it. It would not be inclusive if he said, well, you have a different skin color, so you always have to go last. Like, that be, if we make something where we make it very hard for someone, for some like totally stupid reason, then we would say it's not inclusive. But I think we all recognize that, yeah, like, it's software engineering, it takes skill, like, getting to understand how open source works is like, it takes a little bit of effort, and like sometimes you'll get burned, and some people, you'll get just also used to the pain to a certain extent. Like, I think we all have written patches, put our tears and sweat in it, and it never landed. Like, that just happens. Yeah. And I think we can recognize that this is, sort of for the greater good. Like, ultimately, it's not about, James's pet peeve per se. It's good that he has one, and hopefully it can actually benefit the project. But if it turns out it's not good for a project, we should not land it. Like, landing patches is not a goal in itself, and it takes some effort. And I think the only, like, it is a real issue. Like, if we recognize that, well, it turns out to be much harder for, certain groups to get their patches accepted, they get held to a much higher standard. Like, that's things we should address.
Right.
So I'm gonna push back on you a little bit.
Sure.
So I think when Michael was up on the stage introducing everything and talking about all the commits that have come in the last year, half of them are doc and test fixes. And those aren't held to the same standard as stuff in core. And I'm not saying that they're not as important, but just the code isn't as hot. We don't need to be as rigorous in writing our test code as we need to be in our production code, and our documentation as well. Is like, it's not, you can go through, and James has done this, and go through all the pros and find lots of places where you can contribute and help. So I see no reason why we shouldn't be trying to help enable and empower people who aren't even developers to begin with the ability to help and contribute. And I've seen numerous people who start that way and then can grow to be some of our best contributors in the meantime. And so I'd be worried a little bit that kind of the way you were talking about approaching it, Bert, like, yeah, there is a lot of learning to do, and it isn't fun to ski and fall down a hill, but you can be the kind of instructor who watches someone fall down the hill, or someone who like holds someone's hand for the first little bit and makes it less painful. And maybe Node Core working on like the production code isn't where you can learn, but I don't see why contributing doc fixes to Node isn't somewhere where people can have their first commits ever and learn how to program.
I mean, my point was, of course, that inclusivity and like it's easy to contribute are different things. And what you're saying is, well, you know, we don't, we don't just need a black slope. We want a blue one, whatever, and an orange one too.
Right.
And yes, that's totally true. And then I think over time the project has needed more and more of people that do these kind of like maybe like less hardcore things, and it's actually very helpful for the project to do that. I mean, no disagreement.
Right. So, either of you?
Yeah, maybe. So, like, yeah, that actually brings up kind of a good point. Like, one thing we can do really better is showing people that the work is valued, that they receive the attribution they deserve, especially for doc and test changes, because, like, that's something where we always can improve. We're having more people take looks on that, and trying to improve even minor things is really worth it. And yeah, we like, I know there has been some talk about that. We should like really get places to show that the work is valued. I know that might be a bit hard for when we have a contributor list of, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people by now. We're at least really close to that. But yeah, we are tech people. There are ways to do that. We'll find a way, and we should. And yeah.
I just want to. I agree with most of it, even on the point of view that are not in agree. I agree with both sides basically. So there is a lot of work in all this stuff. I just want to add one more thing that. We haven't talked about till now. It's still fairly hard to contribute, I call grand challenge in core. Like there are some piece of functionalities that should be in core that it's not in core, and it's not something that it's done ever. There are some basic functionalities that should be done in core that requires, let me say, expertise, time, talent. And if you're passionate about those, and I just mentioned one, I would really love to have the time myself to take on this, but I don't. It's for example is DTLS. DTLS is something that should be core, and it's not. And so if you are in the Internet of Things world, you know what I'm talking about. But this is my take. Another one is HTTP2. Maybe we'll see something about that in the near future. But I think one thing we should be better at is highlighting what are probably the grand challenge. Like, do we want something that is big, like to land in a big chunk of functionality that maybe a group of people can take together, and how to support that type of collaboration? Because the current level of contribution right now is around the single pull request. It's a single individual then send a little fix, rather than a group of people that contribute a bigger chunk of work, or maybe 10 or 20 commits or something that do some stuff. So
it's definitely a good point. We've had a when I first got involved, we had this thing, it was pretty common where if a pull request was too minimal, right? If it was just changing like a word in the docs or changing a comment or whatever it was, that's too small for us to even look at and to consider, and a lot of times they were just rejected outright. I'm very happy that we've moved away from that, you know, to this idea that no change is too small, because you know it may be that the person is just trying to get their feet wet in how to contribute and getting familiar with the process. So it's I'm very happy that we're kind of breaking that bottom barrier, right? But you're right, we have this block on that anything that's too big just becomes too big to consider and too big for us to land easily. I mean, Anna made the point. And I think we need a lot more work to do on that end too, just trying to figure out what's there. So
yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, James. Like in defense of the good old times, like that was a time that there were literally 2 people who would ever review pull request. If you if you get like tens or something like that per day, then it becomes a lot of work to review everything. Plus, we had a little process, so including at the time checking the CLA, like telling people like to fix their code. So if you make a one-word change, it was just too much overhead for us to process. Nowadays, I think it's very different, and I think actually pull requests cannot be small enough, more or less,
right,
because we have so many collaborators that can actually review and land stuff nowadays.
Right.
So, like, if anything, we should probably have done that earlier. Is what I would think.
Okay. So I want to start wrapping this up. I think we're running close on time. Is there any questions that anyone has on contributing? I can hear you. Yeah.
So I'm going to repeat the question and just give me a thumbs up if I got it right. But it was using ES modules as the frame, and specifically that in these very, very large contentious issues with lots of conversation, it can be really hard to keep track of everything that's happening, and then it can almost feel like the core technical committee is privy to more information, and that's not necessarily being shared in the best way. We don't know either.
That's a good answer.
No, there is so much stuff, and I've seen it happen where things get locked sometimes, or when discussion gets like moved, and generally that's just so like we can keep up. But what I can suggest for you is the core technical committee meetings are weekly and they're available. And generally what we're doing in those meetings is actually giving updates as to what's going on with a lot of this. So anytime there's like big things like async wrap, updates on ES modules, updates on the URL parser that James was doing, pretty much any larger scale work that's happening has a weekly update happening during that meeting. And all the meeting notes are available in Markdown inside of the repo. If you go into documents, the core technical committee meeting notes are there. I think that this is an interesting challenge that we want to try to figure out how to solve as well. And this is perhaps an example of some other way in which you can come and help out, which is some of the social problems of collaborating on software. It's tough. ES modules is filled with so many opinions and thoughts. People are scared, people are angry, people are excited. You can't wade through it all. You almost need to know exactly the one or two places to look to get an update on how we feel about it today. And that's the other thing too, because it's constantly shifting. So I believe that the foundation has actually hired an amazing individual Jen Turner to start putting together newsletters that are going to try to collect some of this information. But as someone who has the luxury of putting a lot of time into this, I often feel the same way you do. And maybe what we can do that's really great is to just express that and let you know, hey, it's just as lonely inside sometimes too.
Yeah, and we're definitely, and this has actually come up. We have an evangelization working group that is starting to take a fresh look at this problem of how do we actually improve the communication between what the core technical team is looking at and these large issues that we're dealing with. How do we communicate that with the community? And also, how do we reverse it in terms of making sure that the CTC, the core technical team, is getting the proper input and feedback from the community that we need, right? Because that's the other side of it is a lot of the decisions are being made kind of in a vacuum because we don't know necessarily what the community is needing with these things. So we need more.
I just want to add a couple of things about ES modules and promises, which is the most contentious things. First of all, you have probably not seen me commenting on those. So that's the first thing. Most of the time, you should be careful when there is these flames going on. Is there somebody else that has already made your points? Probably don't add more noise to the conversation. That's one. Usually, if you have some new points, some new ideas, fresh ideas, please, we want to hear all of them. If somebody else already said something, what in a way that you can agree with, please, you not even say, I agree with it, just use the nice GitHub faces to signify that, because it makes very hard to follow what's going on, and
it makes it very unapproachable and kind of scares off the new people.
Yeah,
right?
It's unapproachable, and those are really hard challenges. So there are two problems which is no good solution, basically.
Right.
So we still haven't found any, as far as I know. So this is what they are critical, because there are technical reasons, because yes and no. So
I also just want to point out, it's like in all the processes that we do have, yes, there's code contributions. We talk about there's various ways of contributing. Getting involved just to help us get better at the process is another option. There's one individual, he's here at the conference, William Kapkin, I know quite a few of you know him. He started getting involved with the TSC repository just to help us keep on top of stuff, right? He looked at it and realized, well, these people aren't actually maintaining this. So he volunteered to start maintaining it, and his help has been absolutely invaluable to it. It's actually keeping the TSC running smoothly. He hasn't made a lot of, I think he's made a couple of code contributions and stuff. He's a great engineer. He's done some wonderful things out in the community. But as far as his contributions to core, it's primarily just keeping us all on track. That kind of stuff, if you want to come help, if that's something you're passionate about, please, we need the help. Any other questions? Okay, great. I think we're good to go. We're still going to be around if anybody else has any other questions, but I think we have the closing keynotes coming up here, so excited about those. So thank you all.